Yo, what up guys, it's Brock, welcome back. I just want to quickly pop in before this video gets going and just let you know that it is a long video. So if there's parts of this that you kind of already know and you don't want to watch, there's chapters down there, go check those out. I have a full walkthrough of my whole process, but then I also explain some general audio principles, some mic choices, all those things at the beginning. So kind of choose what you want to watch. If you want to watch the whole thing, great, but I just want to let you guys know it is a long one, so feel free to use those chapters to kind of hop around, but let's jump in. Audio is such an important component to what we do as filmmakers, and I feel like it's not talked about enough, from stuff like capturing sound design to recording talking heads like this to capturing interviews. All of these things require good audio and good audio editing. I think a lot of times we hear videos about, okay, here's how to capture the audio, but now what do I do with it? I think a lot of people miss the processing part of editing, just like you do your video, just like coloring your footage. You need to edit your audio, you need to compress, you need to EQ, sometimes you may need to do some noise removal, sometimes you may need to clean up some things, tweak some things. So that's what I'm talking about today. I'm gonna kind of walk you through how I edit my audio for stuff like this, like these talking heads, how I would process this vocal, and we'll kind of go step by step and kind of give you guys exactly what I do. Now, before we jump to the computer, I do want to kind of give you guys a background of my audio experience. So I'm not a necessarily professional audio engineer, but I do have a lot of live sound experience. I've worked on some studio stuff, is in post-processing for bands and vocals and different things like that, and I run live sound on a regular basis. So I kind of do know what I'm talking about to some degree, especially when it comes to stuff like this that is actually really simple, and hopefully I'll have some good insights for you guys into the audio world and what that looks like, and kind of how to bridge the gap from the audio engineer world to the filmmaking world, and how you can be an expert in both and how vitally important that is. Now, what I'm using right now is a Shure MV7, which is a dynamic microphone, meaning that it is similar to an SM7B, an SM58, all these mics that you see people use, like the classic Shure SM58 that you see a lot of singers use on stage and everything like that. That is a dynamic microphone. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say don't sound good, I mean like in this situation I'm in right now. I'm in my apartment. I rent here, so I don't have a lot of stuff hung on the walls. So for me, this room doesn't sound the best in terms of, like, if you clap your hands, if you talk, you kind of hear this boxy, gross reverb sound. So for me, a dynamic microphone is best, because something like a condenser microphone that like a lot of singers and vocalists will use in a studio environment that is curated and it's treated, or like a shotgun microphone, those are all a lot of times going to be condenser microphones, which means that they're just going to be more sensitive to the sounds around them. Now, that does give them this nice, crispy, full, rich sound, but what you also get is a lot of room noise. And if you have a room that doesn't sound good, it's going to shine in a bad way with a condenser microphone. So for a lot of people, a dynamic microphone like this is best, even though a condenser in the right situation would probably sound better. This is the best for a situation like this. Now, I have made one modification to my MV7, and that is a windscreen from a Shure SM7B. Now, if you don't know what a Shure SM7B, that is like the radio microphone that everyone uses. If you've watched Joe Rogan podcasts or anything like that, a lot of times, guaranteed they're gonna have an SM7B. It's been around for years. It's a great microphone. To me, it's overpriced for what it is. I think the Shure MV7 is the best for your money. But one thing that the SM7B does better than the MV7 is the windscreen out of the box. So I actually purchased a replacement windscreen for the 7B and just slid it right over the capsule on the MV7, and it works great, and it gives you a little bit more separation from the mic capsule itself. And in turn, it reduces what we call plosives, which are when you say things like plosive, anything with a P sound, a lot of times you can get the kind of basic grossness in the microphone that you don't really want. So the windscreen helps break up the air coming out of your mouth and limits the impact on the capsule of the microphone itself. And so a taller windscreen gives you further away and allows for that air to disperse before it reaches the capsule much better. Now, another thing that you can do to minimize plosives, like I'm doing right now, is to kind of have the mic angled a little bit differently. I'm not talking directly into it. I'm kind of talking over it, and it's a little bit below my mouth so that I'm not pushing all the air from my mouth directly into the microphone, and you still get a good quality sound. Now, you don't want it to get too far away, because the further away you get, the more room noise you're going to start to hear. So you want to make sure that you have a good distance from the mic, but you also don't want to be too close, because then it's going to get too bassy and it's going to get out of control really fast. So you want to make sure that you have about an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches away from the microphone capsule itself. And that tends to be a good rule of thumb in terms of distance you should be when recording. Now, I am recording my audio in Logic Pro. I'm not recording in my video editing software of choice, which would be Final Cut or DaVinci. I'm actually tracking this in Logic because I'm not recording with my camera preamp. My R6 is mounted up here on this tripod, but I'm not using its 3.5 millimeter mic input. They just don't sound as good. They just don't. And this mic wouldn't even work with that. I would have to get an adapter and it would just get weird. So those preamps built into your camera most likely don't have enough juice and enough good high quality power to power a microphone like this. So that's why I'm using my interface, and then I'm going into Logic. But all of these principles still apply even if you're recording into your camera. Like if I was using my C70 that has built-in preamps, I could just use those and use the preamp built in the camera. They're nicer, they're mini XLR, I have the cable to adapt it, and that would work just great as well. But my Audient has just a little bit nicer preamps, and for me, in this talking head situation, I have my laptop right here, I'm at my desk, so I can still record, and it's not that inconvenient to use another piece of software. So all of these editing tips I'm about to show you will apply and can work just fine in your video editing software of choice. I'm just gonna do it in Logic because that's where all my plugins are and it just works a little bit better. But everything I'm doing in Logic, you'll be able to do in your video editing software, and it should have a version of each plugin that I'm using. It may not be exactly the same, but it'll be something that essentially does the same thing. Now, one thing I'm not doing that a lot of people do with this microphone is I'm not using the USB functions of it at all. I'm recording with an XLR. I love that Shure still included an XLR port on this microphone as opposed to just USB recording. USB recording just sounds worse. That's honestly the simplest way I can say it. You're just gonna get less quality. I find that a good old XLR cable sounds better going into a good interface that you know how to set up properly. Now, in my case, I'm recording into an Audient ID14, and this is a analog interface, meaning that it has two analog preamps, true analog preamps. Audient is a company that is known for their preamp quality, and they've decided to take their really nice analog high-end presets and put them into different interfaces. And they have a couple different sizes. This is the ID14, which has two inputs, and it's fantastic. And it's some of the best sounding quality that you can get in a really small package. So that's why I choose to use an actual interface and an XLR cable as opposed to the USB functions of this microphone. Now, the benefit of analog preamps really shines in the richness of it and the high end. The high end on analog preamps is much, much smoother and less harsh and brittle sounding compared to the digital counterpart, along with some harmonic information that just adds richness and warmth to your sound. I'm a big analog preamp fan, and the Audient interfaces are some of the best ways to get that at an affordable price. Now, I know I spit a lot of information at you before we even started to actually edit. I just kind of wanted to give you a breakdown of how I actually record this audio to begin with, so you know where the source is coming from and how important getting a good source is. All right, so we're at the computer now, and I have Logic pulled up here, and basically what I'm doing is I'm just going to loop this section of the audio that you heard beforehand, and I'm going to kind of go through my editing process. Now, when you hear this, is going to be basically just the straight audio out of my microphone into Logic here. So let's just give that a listen and just try to pay attention to what you may or may not hear. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. All right, so right away, I hear that there's some boxiness. So what you're going to do first always, in my opinion, is you should EQ first. Now, I'm using this plugin called Pro Q3. This is a paid plugin. Now, your editing software will have a plugin for free that is built into your software. It should be called a parametric EQ or just an EQ or whatever it may be called. But what I'm going to do is just use this as an example because this has such a good visualizer of frequencies that I kind of want to be able to use this to kind of help you guys see some things. And this is what I use. But again, you can use a free plugin to do the exact same thing. Basically, what I would do first is give it another listen. And I know for a fact, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and click, and I know I'm going to put a low cut filter, or in a lot of you'll hear this called a high pass filter. Okay, some softwares may call it a high pass. Basically, what this is going to do is it's going to kind of get rid of any low end that I don't need. And there's going to be that. There always is in microphones. You don't need stuff for just a vocal like this, just talking below like 200 hertz sometimes, depending on the vocal. Females are going to be higher. Male vocals are going to be lower, and everybody's different. So I'm going to kind of listen and feel it out and see what I think it should be. Yeah. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really. So you can hear what it does when I pull it all the way up. That's kind of why I use them, and they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where they're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything. I'm starting mine around 60 hertz, which is kind of low. A lot of people would say that's low, but for a talking head, you kind of want the richness of it. You don't want it to be too thin sounding. You kind of want it to have some warmth and some richness. So that's why I'm doing that. And basically what I'm going to do is I can already tell there's some boxiness around like 700 hertz that I don't love. It's always in my vocal. Every time I edit my own vocal, I kind of know it's going to be there, so I just get ready to cut it anyways. Just try to listen to what happens when I kind of cut some of this out. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them, and they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where they're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them, and they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And all right, so that's step one. So basically what I did is I cut a little bit, like kind of a wide, soft cut, bell cut at around 700, 675 hertz. And then I came in again a little bit tighter, a little bit more precise, a little more focused. And you should be able to do this in your software as well at around 1500. Sometimes you got to boost frequencies to hear what you want to cut. Just kind of boost, like for example, like if I boost this, you'll hear the difference. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them in there. So this right here around 400 hertz, I don't love either. So I'm probably going to cut that. Again, it's just some boxiness. If you were going to put this, in a song or something, if I was singing, it'd be different. You'd probably do it differently. But for stuff like this is kind of what I would do. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where they're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where they're kind of like the baseline mic. Okay, so now you may see me actually boosting a little bit here. I kind of like this, like 85 hertz frequency on my vocals. So sometimes I may give it like a little bit of a boost. It just kind of warms things up. You don't want to go crazy. You don't want to add too much, because on worse speakers, like right now I'm using headphones because I have speakers on my desk, but I just don't trust the room around me to give me an accurate picture of what I should be hearing. And so for those of you in like an apartment, in a bedroom that doesn't have any sound treatment on the walls, or just sounds funky, I kind of recommend headphones. Something like these Audio-Technica, the M50s or whatever they're called, or A50X or whatever it is. These are great because they give you a flat response. They're not like, like buying Beats that are gonna boost, the low end just so you hear all the bass. They're not doing anything like that. So they're giving you a really flat, accurate picture of what you should be hearing. So this allows me to edit audio more accurately and kind of know what I'm doing. The changes I'm making will most likely sound good pretty much everywhere. You don't want to go crazy boosting, but sometimes if there's like a nice frequency, you can boost it and accentuate it a little bit, as opposed to always just feeling like you can only cut with EQ. So I'm going to continue just to kind of tweak a little bit and make some adjustments, and then we'll move on to step two. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them, and they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where they're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them, and they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean, okay, so what I did here basically is just a couple like harsher, high-end frequencies that are sensitive to the human ear. And in this like 3K, 3000 hertz to around 8000, there's like a lot that can be harsh on the human ear and kind of hurt, like when you ever go to a concert or hear someone talking in an event and it's just like, almost gives you a headache, like it just hurts. That's a lot of times what those frequencies are. You want to make sure that the audio is not fatiguing to people. And ear fatigue is a real thing. So you want to make sure it's pleasurable to listen to, easy to listen to, and there's going to be nothing that hurts anyone's ears. So what I did here was I kind of pulled one around 5500 and one around 3500. And these are just things that kind of happen in my own voice that I kind of know are there. So I always like to tame them just a little bit. In an audio world, decimals are basically the unit of measurement for loudness, essentially. So if you see dB represented anywhere or decimal level, like that's kind of what that is. So for me, in this case, I'm cutting around 3.25 dB and about 2.5 dB at these frequencies, and the rest of them are, usually around 2 or less. So you're not making drastic changes here. We're just kind of shaping the sound to get a still natural but more pleasurable vocal to listen to. And then here at 1100, this is where you would call the S's. So when you say stuff like, snake and snack and sibilance and like all those things, that's where sibilance lives. That's why the word is what it is. And that also can be fatiguing for people's ears. So you want to make sure that you also kind of tame that if you have a person that has a lot of S's in their vocal, or if they are, accentuate those S's a lot, you may need to do more here. You may need to actually use a plugin. There's plugins called de-essers For me, I don't have that much of a problem, and this microphone and these preamp combo really don't create too many S's, but like on condenser microphones, you get a lot more of that. Shotgun microphones, you get more of that. So you may have to tame this more depending on the person, but for my case, all I did was this plugin in particular. This is the only thing you guys may not have access to if you don't have this particular plugin, but as a thing called dynamic bands, and basically what it means is like I activated it on this high end here. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. You can see it bouncing. Basically, what I'm telling this to do is when the high end, when 11,000 hertz and the approximate area around that, when that reaches this level, I want it to kind of push down on those frequencies. So basically, it's leaving the high end there until it gets to a certain level, and then it starts to tame it down. So that's just a trick you can do. Some of your plugins may do the same thing, but that's what I did here to basically be a mini de-esser plugin just within this thing. That's probably all I would do to EQ, honestly. I think it sounds pretty good. Let me give it one more listen just to make sure. Okay, yeah, so I just widened that a little bit, but I think that's good. So next, what you want to do is do something called compress your vocal. When it comes to compression, and I'm recording a video like this, and I'm talking, for example, into this microphone, there's going to be certain words that make my vocal quieter. Like when I say certain things, I may lean in, but if I want to emphasize something, I may get a little louder and then begin to kind of talk louder, or certain frequencies will do these things. Certain letters will bring out certain frequencies that make your voice louder in that moment or quieter or whatever that may be. So a lot of times you'll have people that have a wide dynamic range of speaking, meaning that there's a lot of really loud moments and there's a lot of quiet moments. So what a compressor does is it kind of evens all of that out, because you don't want a situation where you're listening to someone talk and you have to go in there and constantly turn it up and then turn it back down, turn it up, turn it back down. So that's basically what a compressor does, is the compressor is going to lessen the dynamic range of the audio that you are compressing and get you more of an even sound. Now, you can go really too hard with this very easily, so it's a very subtle thing. Now, again, all of your software should have a compressor in it. Just go search for it in the audio plugin section or wherever that looks like for you. Logic Pro has a handful of compressors built in. There's a lot of different kinds, okay? My friend Micah has very strong opinions. He's an audio engineer, and he always laughs at me for the compressors I choose to use versus the ones that he would use. But today I would probably go with a VCA compressor here. This is just what I normally use. I can't even remember if this is the one that Micah doesn't use or would use. I don't remember. But anyway, Mike, if you're watching, this is for you. When on a compressor, you're going to have multiple options. You're going to have attack, you're going to have ratio, you're going to have threshold, makeup gain, release time, and knee. For stuff like this, I wouldn't overthink it. I wouldn't overcomplicate it. I probably wouldn't come in here and touch a lot right out of the gate. Basically, what I would do now is come in and adjust the threshold, and basically the ratio, I would leave it 2 to 1. That's fine for this kind of thing. Now, when you see this meter right here, this is decimal level that it's reducing. So this is called gain reduction, how much gain reduction you're getting out of your compressor. For something like this, I would not go more than 5. So you would want it to peak at 5 at the most extreme case. For this situation, it's probably going to end up around anywhere from 3 to 5. Maybe 3 to 4 dB level of gain reduction. So let me get that dialed in, and then I'll come back and kind of explain what I would do from here. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean, all right, so that's kind of where I would leave my threshold. You're going to deal with your attack and release. And the attack is basically how sensitive the compressor is. So how fast it's going to grab them and pull them down. Think of it this way. The faster you attack, the more intense the compressor is going to sound. The slower you attack, the smoother it's going to sound. For something like this, like a vocal, you don't want the attack to be too fast, but you also don't want to be too slow. So I would say it's somewhere around the middle. I would probably kind of just use my ears to listen. That's kind of what I normally do. Obviously, if you're doing instruments or different things, you would set them differently. But for this situation, I'm going to kind of start around 35 milliseconds and just see how that sounds. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything. So you can see when I turn it all the way up, it gets insane. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where they're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything. So I think around 25 milliseconds. And then release time is essentially like how long the compressor is going to keep holding those peaks. So you can think of it that way. The faster you have the release time, the more kind of like pulsy it's going to start to sound, if that makes sense. So I like to lengthen my release time to fairly long. It just kind of helps a talking head situation like this sound really smooth to me. So that's just kind of how I prefer it. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for, like, watch it when I'm going to turn the release time all the way to 0 and then turn it at its longest, and watch the the smoothness of the meter, the gain reduction happening change, because it's interesting. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean situations where, so now you can see it's just kind of, now you can see it just kind of like even things out and kind of held it steady, and the variation was less. So in this situation now, you would say you could go into your makeup gain here and add essentially the max decimal level that you're reducing. So in this case, it's 5. So that's why it's called makeup gain. What that's going to do is it's going to kind of make up for the loudness that you lost while compressing. So now I'm going to kind of turn the compressor off and turn it back on and just make sure it's not doing anything weird to my sound that I don't like, that I'm not noticing at the moment. They're kind of like the baseline microphones. They're not going to be the best at anything, but they're going to be really good at a lot of things. And that's kind of why I use them. And they're great for rooms that don't sound good. And when I say rooms that don't sound good, I mean, yeah, I like that. Compression is sensitive, so don't overdo it. You don't want to over squash a vocal. It'll get to sound gross, and you'll start hearing a lot of the room noise the more you compress. So you don't want to overdo that. So just be careful. All right, so the only thing I did come back in here to the EQ after compressing. Sometimes you may need to go back and adjust your EQ a little bit, or you can put a new EQ after. In this situation, I just went back to the original and kind of addressed the problem that I heard. I just didn't like what was happening here. So I added this bell in right here and just cut that down just a little bit more. And honestly, guys, this is probably all I would do to this track. One thing you can always do is go over here on your master bus, or like in this case, if you're in an editing software, you could just put it at the bottom of the chain. But you could always come in and add a limiter, and a limiter will basically save you to make sure that you don't peak. Because I'm not listening to this entire thing right now. So this is probably when I was demonstrating what plosive is. So I can come in here and check this and just make sure that it doesn't sound too weird. A lot of times you can get the see how that didn't get like insanely loud? Like it didn't get to the point where you feel like you needed to turn it down. That's the compressor doing its job. And the one thing you can do is you can come here and add a limiter. As you can see, I already have it on screen here. You can set this to basically probably like -2 is what I normally do for a talking head like this. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell the audio that no, you can't go higher than -2 dB, and anything above 0 is clipping. So most of your music that you listen to is mastered at around like -14, -12. Some of it's -16. So for me, for talking heads like this, you can go a little louder. That'll just kind of make sure that nothing's going to get by the compressor, and that nothing's going to get too loud and start clipping, and then you get distortion and it gets gross. Like you can hear, it's not really doing much, but it's there, and it's just kind of a peace of mind. So if you want to do that, you could. You don't have to, but as long as your gain's set right, you shouldn't have that problem anyway, but it just kind of protects you and make sure. And you notice I didn't touch a single fader the whole time I was in here. I didn't change volume at all because I got it right initially. I'm happy with this. Again, this is not an extreme situation because I got a good source in the beginning and I'm not doing or having to do a lot. But you can tell a difference, and these little things go a long way, and they add up to just more consistent audio. So this is a lesson in getting it right in camera or as you record first, and then you'll have less to do when it comes to editing. But if I did poorly at my job and didn't really, set things right, I would have a lot more work to do, and it would be a lot harder to get a good sound out of this audio. So as you can see, setting it up properly to begin with goes a long way. It's really simple to get good audio. You just kind of have to know what to do, and then make sure that you take your time to do it right. So that's my process. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful for you. Feel free to hit me up with any questions you may have in the description. I'm also going to put together a PDF for you guys to kind of walk you through this process. So feel free to download that. It's on my Sellify store, but it's free. All you got to do is just go and hit download. You'll be able to get that. And it'll kind of be a good reminder of kind of what that process should look like. And so feel free to go download that as well. It's in the description. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you. I'll catch you in the next one.